Fortnite has hundreds of characters, but at the core of the story are the 7. Without their involvement, the current Fortnite story couldn't take place, but out of all the members, there's one that stands out above the rest. And this character is arguably the most important in the group. He's the one that started everything all the way back to Fortnite Chapter 1 Season 3, and ironically, he's the member that we know the least about. The Visitor is potentially the most important character in all of Fortnite, and if we can figure out his story, it should answer a lot of Fortnite's biggest mysteries. For those who weren't there, Fortnite Season 3 was pivotal to the game becoming what it was. The comet in the sky was a big deal, and it was the first sign that we ever had of Fortnite having some resemblance of a story. A small shooting star quickly became a meteor that found its way to the Fortnite island. It wouldn't be until the following season that we found out what was inside. There was someone piloting it, and that would be the Visitor. I wanted to take a quick pause here to highlight a few interesting details. First, the Visitor arrived in a meteor just like the Foundation would an entire chapter later. What makes this really interesting is that it took the Visitor an entire season to arrive on the island, and his vessel was seen coming towards us in space. That's a stark contrast to the Foundation, who was able to seemingly arrive on the island within an instant. The Visitor must have been traveling a great distance to get to us. The next interesting element is the ship itself. I've always wondered where the 7 got their tech from. I used to think it was the Imagined Order, considering a few of their members worked for them, but now I'm starting to think it may have been the Visitor. The Visitor may technically be the first member of the 7, but more on that later. After taking half a season to escape from the meteor, the Visitor hijacks a rocket and uses zero-point rifts to break through space and time. But where did he go? Or maybe we should be asking, when did he go? And see, when we start asking these questions, this is when things start to get a little weird. When you look at the Fortnite story as one large timeline, things start to get a little hazy with certain elements. Like, there's certain events that are clearly being glossed over that we need to give us the full context of the story. For example, when did Geno discover the Fortnite island and the zero point? It must have been sometime before Chapter 1 Season 1, because Jonesy's snapshot was on the island, and we know that he was recruited by Dr. Sloan. But see, that opens the door to asking other questions like, when were the 7 formed? Was it before Jonesy became a member of the Imagined Order? Not to mention, the Imagined and the Order obviously worked for Geno and even spent some time in the loop, but what about the Foundation? He also seemed to have worked for the IO, but at one point in time. How was he able to put a team together? How long did it take him to put the team together? Was it all in one go, or did the 7 get formed over a long period of time? Now, those are a lot of questions that have been thrown at you, and they honestly all probably deserve their own separate video, but we want to know, how does this relate all back to the Visitor? See, he's the missing piece of the puzzle that kind of puts everything in motion, which is why Fortnite is so protective of him. Don't you find it odd that he's the one member of the 7 that we know absolutely nothing about? Everyone else, we either know their backstory or their role within the 7. Fortnite has described the Visitor as the navigation expert for the 7, but we've never seen that. As a matter of fact, we've never even seen him speak. Now, before you go on a rant about how he spoke in the comics, I would like to point out a couple of details. First, the dialogue that the Visitor had in the comics doesn't add any context to his character or play a big role in the story. It could have easily been given to any other character, which makes me think that the writers at Marvel just gave his character something to do for one panel, just to drop him for the remainder of the comic. The second thing I would like to point out is that the comic seems to take place in a different timeline from the game. There are too many major details that differ from our series of events that happened during the Collision event. It makes it hard for me to believe that it's the same story, but we'll delve into that on another video. What I'm getting at here is that the Visitor is such an essential part of the Fortnite story that Epic is intentionally keeping his origins a secret. They're so guarded with him that they won't even let him talk in-game, even though we know he has the ability to, and it's not based on what happened in the comics. The Visitor has interesting interactions with the other 7 members, but that could only be possible through verbal communication.
You want to stay permanently? Let me think about it.
It's nice to see you settling down, my friend. So, you're thinking of settling down. I hear Sleepy's nice.
So based on these interactions, we know 2 things. For one, the Visitor is well respected among all members of the 7. But most importantly, he seems to be weary of the war and wants to get away from the action. It sounds somewhat similar to another member of the 7. Someone who's still working on proving himself to the group. Jonesy. And interestingly enough, Jonesy and the Visitor have never interacted with each other. I don't believe Jonesy has ever even brought up the Visitor, and it's almost like the Visitor is avoiding Jonesy. See, this is where I need you to put on your theory hats, because this is where everything I talked about comes together. The Visitor is actually Jonesy, but from an earlier point in the timeline. And think about it, if that's true, it could potentially answer a lot of questions about the Fortnite story. Now, I could be entirely wrong about all of this, but this is how I could see the series of events playing out. Right now, the Seven are trying to fight off the liquid chrome. If they're not successful, they've got a handful of options. One would be to escape to a different reality like the Paradigm did and start over. The second would be going to the flip side and experimenting on the cubes to find a way to fight the last reality. The third and final option would be to use time travel to change the course of events before they happen. I have a feeling that the remaining members of the Seven could explore at least two of these options at the same time as a failsafe, but let's just say that they only explore time travel. Out of the remaining members of the Seven, who has the best chance of navigating the Omniverse after traveling through time? Jonesy. He's been to more realities and has studied more language arguably than anyone in the Seven. And he's very familiar with how the 0-point portals work. I could see a Fortnite season where Jonesy finally gets his Seven suit. It looks just like the Visitors and he goes back in time to Chapter 1 to try to save everyone. They prepare a ship disguised as an asteroid to stay under the radar of the last reality. Unfortunately, the last reality picks up on their use of the 0-point to travel through time, and the last reality makes an attempt to stop him. Right before he leaves, the last reality makes contact with the ship. They're unsuccessful in stopping him, but they did veer him off of his course. He teleports through a zero rift, but randomly starts hurtling through time. That is, until he hits the Chapter 1 map. He's where he needs to be, but not when he needs to be. In the present time, the last reality are trying to hunt him down, so they start looking for abnormalities through space and time until they come across the point Jonesy used the rocket to try to return to his original destination. They sent a cube as a type of scout to find out where he went, but unfortunately they were too late. And that's what starts the events of Season 5. Jonesy, meanwhile, goes to his original set point where the Imagined Order weren't entirely evil, and he tries to shape their path to protecting the Omniverse, potentially even teaching a young Jenna what he knows. But this eventually devolves into the version of the Imagined Order that we've fought over the last few seasons. In a final attempt to course correct, Jonesy as the Visitor meets the Foundation and ends up creating the Seven to fix his mistake, as these younger versions of the Seven are not excited about what they're seeing from the Imagined Order. All the while, Dr. Sloan recruits one of her first soldiers, Agent Jones, for a new experiment titled The Loop. And this is how our story comes full circle. This would explain why the Visitor never unmasks himself, why he doesn't speak much, and would give some clarity to the origin of the Imagined Order as well as the Seven. It also gives a hint to how the Seven got their tech and why they use meteors from time to travel. Finally, it would explain how Fortnite could potentially have more than one timeline. Which reminds me, I never explained my thought behind that. Why do I think the comic timeline is different from the video game? If you subscribe, I'll tell you in the next theory video. But until then, why don't you check out this one right here, which goes over why I think the Seven are villains. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Peace out.